who are you?
Nice. Yeah. So maybe I'll just say before I answer these questions, because they're such profound questions, that I'm happy to talk about it as someone who loves talking about this kind of thing, but wouldn't want to present myself or be seen as any kind of authority on, because they can be considered spiritual questions or philosophical questions. So I don't consider myself someone that anyone else should consider an authority. But yeah, I like talking about this kind of thing. So I'm happy to ponder, who am I? It's something I consider often. And the short answer is I don't know. But it's certainly, at least from a conventional perspective, people call me Amir. I was born in New Zealand. I worked as a dancer for a long time. Now I run an organization that deals with exactly these kind of questions and curates events and things that are involved, like who or what am I? What is reality? What is my place in it? And I would say on examination, it seems obvious there's an experience of there being a body, of there being a sense of progression through time, of there being some kind of continuity to my experience, there being a very ephemeral, ungraspable sense of a me, of a being, of an entity, that feels like it has a distinctiveness, although it's very hard for me to put a finger on the distinctiveness because I've, to my memory, never been anyone else. But this is purely imagination. I imagine if I was Eric, right, or my next door neighbor, there'd be a certain different quality tone to the feeling of that being, maybe at a more superficial level, and potentially something emptier and deeper that wasn't different. I think maybe the other most important thing to say in terms of who am I is that I'm clearly conscious, like there's an experience happening, I'm aware. And there's a certain configuration of repeated patterns in this experience of being aware that I associate with a me-ness or an Amir-ness. So I don't know, that's my best shot at it today, but it'll be different if we can do it again in 5 minutes, and it'll probably be a slightly different answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Amir. And you will get the chance right away, actually, because the second question with a slight nuance difference, or maybe big nuance difference, is what are you?
Yeah, what am I? So I'm just aware that every answer could be repeated with like, oh, what is that? But there's certainly a sense of being human. So I imagine being an eagle or a bat is different. So there's certainly a sense of being human, which involves having emotions and thoughts and a body of a certain shape. And I think to delve deeper into some of those things would be better off. It's almost like a scientist would know what that is better than me, like what is a human body versus a dog or a cat or a bird or a rock. And so again, what am I? Whatever I am involves a capacity for experience. I'd say that. So fundamentally, at some level, I would say I am or have a capacity for experience. And there's certain features of that experience. So in this moment involves colors and sounds and feelings and thoughts and again, a sense of time. Somehow there's a certain very vague sense of time passing, that this moment isn't the same as 5 seconds ago. There's a sense that there will be something else happening in 5 seconds. There's a kind of vague sense of all those things. And yet I couldn't point to any one of them to say that what I am is dependent on those things. except insofar I could say, okay, if I was to lose all sense of sight, at some level what I am would remain the same because I'd be aware of the sense of sight having gone. And I would also feel like something about me or in experience had changed. I'd almost say what I am would be some, and I'm aware philosophers can be much more nuanced and clever and distinct about this kind of thing, but yeah, clearly if I took away 3 legs of a chair, I'd still recognize it as a chair. I'd say it's a broken chair, but it wouldn't function as a chair. So I know that if I took away my emotions, or I took away my sight, or I took away my hearing, I'd be like, okay, something about what I am has changed. And yet there'd be something more fundamental than that, that's aware that something had changed. And I don't have a lot to say about that. I'm trying, but yeah.
You're very humble, and it's beautiful to listen to you contemplating this.
Oh, you're very kind. Yeah, well, it's fun to talk about. Like I said, I enjoy talking about it, but as I repeat, I don't consider myself an authority on it. I'm still enjoy contemplating a lot, and I still have this vague sense, which is perhaps surprising, that I'll one day get to a more clear answer. It's probably slightly insane, but nonetheless.
Maybe it's today. We
Yeah,
clear.
maybe now. Maybe with your next question.
Yes, the next question is, what is another?
What is another? So the way I understand that question, you can refine it if you prefer, is I refer in language to others of like, oh, Eric, this guy is doing this 4-question thing. And another, at one level, is a configuration in my imagination. So obviously there's a bunch of pixels on my screen, and I'm assuming they represent an experience that is very similar to mine, in the sense that I assume that for you there's also colors and there's sounds, and there's a whole configuration of experience which I can imagine in a similar way I can imagine I'm no longer experiencing 5 minutes ago. It's a construct in my imagination right now that I existed 5 minutes ago, and there's a slightly different configuration of sounds, thoughts, feelings, tastes, colors, smells, or whatever, same as when I was 5 years old. And that's accessible, some of that's accessible, as it were, now in my memory. And when I consider another, such as Eric, I assume and imagine that there's likewise a configuration of feelings, thoughts, sounds, colors, a bunch of content to experience, more importantly, a capacity for experience, and potentially a certain feeling tone of Ericness that you can distinguish yourself as a configuration of experience. But having said all that, I recognize, on pausing to reflect on the question, I recognize it's an assumption that you could be an incredibly sophisticated, chat, now they've got those chat AIs that it feels quite like speaking to a human. They passed the Turing test, and now there's deep fakes, and now there's deep, so for all I know, you're like the newest version of all those things, and there's no capacity for experience there at all. But I'm making the assumption that there is. I think we're moving, sorry, I'm probably getting slightly off topic, but I think it's going to be very interesting moving into the future, where we're probably not that many years away from one of us quite easily being an AI, and this conversation happening with an AI, and it looking exactly the same. And I do wonder if our whole conception of others is going to change, and then our conception of ourselves. Anyway, I'm getting maybe off track. It's going to be interesting to think about. Maybe to just circle back around the question one more time. Because we've both been engaged with Bernardo Kastrup's work, and I find that approach fairly convincing, that at some deeper level, because this capacity for experience, which might be called awareness or consciousness, the fact that there's an ability to have an experience which is empty of any given experience, that there's a certain aspect to us that is shared. And when I say us, I mean every living being. So at that level, we are the same, although there's a distinct experience happening. I don't know if that's useful at all, but anyway, that's what came out of my mouth. So
thank you. And we have saved the small topic of what is life for the last question.
Yeah, life. Again, I think there's two interesting perspectives on that. Is what do I consider to be life in others, or indeed in myself? That would be the capacity for experience. And when I say capacity, I mean it doesn't depend on any particular configuration of experience, but the fact that I can, for example, see colors, or there can be the experience of sound, there can be the experience of thought and emotion, but it doesn't have to be any one of them. So maybe on a strong psychedelic, I might have an experience in which the content is totally alien to any of the content of my present moment experience. There might, similar like if I'd never seen color, and then I had the experience of seeing color, I would still be the same experiencer, as it were, but it would be a whole different set that I had no language for. There might be, as well as color, sounds, taste, smells, thoughts, emotions, sense of time, sense of space, there might be other categories of experience that exist, and capacities for those experiences that exist that I would call life. But I wouldn't be able to talk about them because I haven't had those experiences. So I'm kind of losing track a bit. So to come back to your question, what is life? Life at some level is awareness or consciousness, or the capacity for experience, which might just be pure experience without any content. So I'd also call, well, that's a good question, actually. So now that I'm thinking out loud, would I still call that life? I might actually, I've never thought about this before, but I might actually call life the capacity for experience plus experience. And if it was just pure potential, just awareness of awareness, I wouldn't call that dead, but nor is it what I think of as life. I don't know. And again, and I'm aware there's another perspective, which is the scientific perspective. When I look objectively, like, well, what do I consider to have that capacity? So to come back to the AI question, I don't consider AI to be alive. I don't consider it to be having an experience. And there might very soon be beings, experiences, you know, AI, computers embodied, maybe with flesh, but that I wouldn't consider to be alive, unless I became convinced that they too were having some kind of experience, which I don't think is possible, but who knows?
Thank you very much,
Yeah,
Amir.
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Maybe I'll add one more thing to the "what am I" question. Is that okay? I'll add one more.
Yeah, sure.
Of like, well, clearly I am. I'd initially want to say part of reality, but in essence, in a way, and I'm kind of wriggling a little bit at the discomfort of saying it, because it feels pompous or something. You know, I mean, in a culture that doesn't go for that. But the way I am reality, since if I'm a part of reality, then I am reality. And without necessarily even knowing what that means. But I would say, because sometimes people go like, oh, what if this is all a simulation, whatever, you know, Elon Musk is kind of, all right, even if this is a simulation inside of a computer from, you know, a super advanced whatever, or it turns up I'll wake up in 5 minutes and I've been playing kind of an incredibly immersive VR, or it's a dream and this is all a dream, that simulation or the dream would still be a part of reality. It wouldn't be like, well, here's reality and there's the dream. That configuration of experiences are still part of what is. And therefore, I am a part of it, or this experience is a part of it. And therefore, whatever I am reality. So I'm inescapably intimate with, or even intimate's too far. I'm inescapably I am reality. There's no separation. And part of that experience includes a feeling of separation, which is amazing. At least in this case here, for me, there can be a feeling of being separate or observing. And I think that's a miracle in and of itself, this kind of sense of being separate from what I must be and observing it, or this yearning to connect, even though there can't be any disconnection, and it would all happen in the same space. So anyway, that thought just came. I know it's not an original thought, but I just thought it'd be fun to share as like, yeah. It's all wonderfully mysterious, I can say that much. And it's fun to meet people like you who enjoy talking about it.
It's beautiful. I'm very glad you got on board, because I found it beautiful and humorous, and it's just a very nice energy to it. So I'm so glad.
This is ridiculous. It's like amazing that everything should know what it is. I mean, when I say should, it's like, if anything is going to be obvious, what you are should be the most obvious thing. As in, when I say should, it's like I would think that if any knowledge or understanding is available to anything with capacity for understanding, it would be what you are, which is most accessible because it's what you are, right? Whereas, like, you know, there's a plant here, there's a table, like, what is that table? Well, I might get that wrong because it's not me. But the fact that it's so difficult or so mysterious to answer that question, like, what are you, is funny. Like, there's comedy in that.
Yes.
It's like, wow, you can't answer this. Like, what do you mean you don't know what you are? That's ridiculous. Answer.
It's pretty basic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Awesome.
have an awesome day.